Live. Okay, I'm Fiona. I'm here with my friend Jenny, and we both went to UC Santa Cruz for
Slugs.
yeah, go Slugs. I'm wearing my Santa Cruz shirt. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wearing the colors kind of, but not really. I, my sweatshirt's somewhere,
Oh my gosh,
probably in the
I know I
car.
haven't worn this, and I was like, oh my gosh, I totally need to wear it today.
Hmm.
So yeah, we know each other from school, and Jenny was a trumpet major, performance major, and also you do teaching. And so we were getting our master's degrees there. Mine was in composition. And yeah, can you talk a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Well, Fiona, it's great to see you again. Our graduate studies were kind of abruptly, ended during COVID. So, we took a Renaissance class online together, but that's I think the
Forgot.
last time I saw you. Yeah, yeah. So I am uh, a performer. I've been teaching the last 2 years, middle school and elementary school music. My first year of teaching middle school was online. So that was all done sort of during 2020, 2021. And then in the last couple of months, I was working as an elementary school teacher. And for both of these positions, they were actually long-term substitute positions. So I kind of jumped into the boat as other people were jumping out. Um, so that was kind of an interesting experience as well. Kind of jumping into the middle of a situation, and yeah, I mean, as far as like teaching goes, I just also wanted to say that I mean that was like my first online teaching and also first elementary school teaching later. But prior to that, I've done a lot of teaching at middle school, like instrumental music stuff. So general music was kind of a new thing for me in the last couple of years, but before that, I was doing some brass coaching, uh, also with some high school groups, did some a cappella and jazz choir coaching, and I spent 2 years teaching English in Austria, the high school level. So yeah, and did some, and then just through all of that, kind of doing private trumpet teaching, and I actually taught tuba even once.
Oh,
It was
that's cool.
Yeah, that's a little known fact, is that I taught tuba to I think he was like the equivalent of a sixth grader in Germany, and he was such a sweet kid, and I just like barely knew what I was doing. But we did a lot of brass fundamentals, and meanwhile I'm like trying to learn how to play tuba at the same time. But
Right,
yeah.
but also speak the language barrier too, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah. So, I mean, I was also, not only was I teaching an instrument I like didn't know how to play, but also I was speaking and teaching it in a language I could barely speak. So, high quality thing that they were receiving. But it was all really good experience, and you know, like I said, there are certain things that are pretty transferable across all the brass instruments. So,
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I
yeah.
was wondering about that with tuba and then trumpet. Because it's like the you guys use the harmonic series, right? For the tunings and stuff like that.
Um, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's I think like when it comes to tuba versus trumpet, it's I think a lot more about like just the breath support and control. I mean, there's just so much more air volume that you need with a tuba, and I think sometimes that technique of more air gets kind of incorrectly placed on trumpet players, and end up with trumpet players just like blowing so much air through the horn and just not getting a good sound, because it doesn't take as much air as a tuba because it's
Right.
not a tuba. But that's sort of yeah, you just kind of have to adjust based on just what you're working with, but.
Wow, that's pretty cool. I mean, you've done a lot of teaching and like different styles of teaching, so not just like one-on-one, but also like classes, like group classes. And then also I want to say because we finished our degree at UC Santa Cruz like the very start of COVID or like right when COVID was like shutting everything down. So like was that 2018 or
Uh, you mean like, oh, you mean like when I started the degree, you mean,
or
or
like when we were done when we were finishing with UC Santa Cruz, like I remember that last quarter was like completely online, or like the last two quarters
yeah,
were completely
that's true.
online
Right.
already.
Yeah.
But there was the strike that was going on as well right
Yeah.
before that. So, you know, you were you teaching were you TAing at that time or
Yeah, so I was TAing during the spring of 2020. I ended up TAing ear training,
Mhm.
and it was the musicianship one class. And so, it was a lot of kind of, freshman music majors, but also a lot of like engineers and, business majors that thought that music theory would be easy. Not the case. So yeah, having to teach ear training online was kind of my first introduction into teaching online music. And I mean, everyone was kind of grappling with how to do that, but I think it also pointed out a lot of maybe some blind spots in the way that music is being taught. And I think there were definitely some good takeaways from going to online to recognize that there are ways that we can make teaching music in the classroom more adaptable, more accessible. So that was a really great takeaway from the whole experience, I thought. And there were some things that just even worked better online.
Right, everyone was always on time for
Yeah, I know. It's like 2 minutes before your class. You're just like, all right.
I mean, everyone would be in their pajamas and like, waking up out of bed, but it was like everyone was always there, which was kind of cool.
Yeah,
But I
it
agree
was.
with you. Like the blind spots, like I feel like doing it online really helped people's ear training because they had to really listen because that's all they had, right? Couldn't really visually always see. Like I did the keyboard lab, so I did all the chord progression stuff with the students, and so it would be hard for them to, usually I'd write it all out on the board for them, and then Anatole was like,
Mhm.
no, don't do that. They have to figure it out themselves. Um, but I just feel like it really helped people like really have to listen in a different way.
Yeah, and I think just, for people who aren't necessarily, familiar with the piano, I mean, the piano is an incredible tool if you know how to use it, but, if you're just, coming into music for the first time, having the ability to just, listen to a recording multiple times versus, only having that, hour and 10 minutes in the classroom, listening to a piano and then being expected to then transfer that, to a practice room. I just thought, being able to record yourself and listen back and have that, um, that expectation that you're doing that was a nice addition. I mean, maybe other, classes, maybe even the class I never took that particular class when it was in person, but my understanding is that there just wasn't as much of like recording yourself and,
Right.
those sorts of tools, not just using the piano in real time.
Hmm.
After we were all online, and that's like all we could do, and people didn't have access to a piano, or they didn't have someone saying like, okay, this note is middle C, so, and like dragging their hand over. So that was all. um it was obviously like super crazy in the middle of it. But looking back, I do think there were some things that uh, that worked well. So yeah,
Yeah, definitely. So I guess like you're teaching, so right now you're kind of teaching one-on-one as well as group classes. Like, can you say more about that?
yeah, sure. So I do have a small trumpet studio right now, and you know, we are still online at this point. So that's been kind of an interesting, uh, y- you know, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have already kind of figured out their rhythm with doing the online classes by now. But for me, teaching privately is something that I hadn't done for a while when I was studying, and then when I was being a full-time teacher in the classroom, I just didn't really have the bandwidth to also have a private studio. So, yeah, I think that the students that I have, it's been really nice to kind of use some of the technology that I learned from teaching public school and doing online public school music, in applying those things in the private classroom. So
Yeah, say more about that, like your teaching style. So I guess like in this video, I should have mentioned it earlier. We're going to be talking about like our teaching styles and like kind of
mm,
like teaching one-on-one versus in a group, and any techniques or anything that we both use, I guess, like online or in person that we've kind of
yeah,
learned over the years, I guess.
yeah, totally. So I think that a lot of the way that I teach, we're all kind of shaped by our teachers, right? But I think that the way I teach is very much based off of my teacher and mentor, Dr. Richard Roper, who's over at UC Santa Cruz as of the making of this video. And I really love the way that he approaches like teaching how to practice. That for me was a real game changer because I've never been someone who was good at practicing. I mean, by that I mean like I would go and practice, but like I wouldn't get the kind of outcome that I'd want, and it'd be frustrating. I'd find myself, wasting time, and not even realize that I was wasting time. So, I really, really respect the way that he like incorporates how to practice into the lesson. So that's something that I am always trying to kind of get back to with my students is like, okay, how would you fix this? How would you adjust this? How would you approach this? Um, and I mean, just like nuts and bolts, I usually start out with, the first couple of minutes, just, asking them how they are, because that can really, yeah, like that can
Oh, yeah.
really affect how your lesson goes. If a student is not, feeling good about themselves, they're not going to play well, right? Um,
Right.
they're not going to be as connected to their body. They're not going to be breathing, in an efficient way. There's just, that mind versus body is so interconnected, and you have that luxury as a private teacher to really kind of explore that more than you do with like a large group of students.
Definitely, definitely. And sometimes students will admit like, oh, I get so nervous around you, and it's like, I think it's just like calming them down and be like, no, I'm just here, to give you feedback. And, I'm totally supportive of, wherever you're at. It's okay. Like, I think, because a lot of teachers, maybe when I was taking, they were a lot more harsh. And I think that
Yeah.
people realize that like that's not a good way to teach. I mean, yeah, it can like make you terrified of your teacher, but it's like, does it make you love the music? Or I want to have it be in an encouraging environment. I don't
Yeah.
want parents to like have to bring their kids, against their will to piano lessons. It's like I want the child to like want to come to piano. you
Exactly. And I mean, yeah, I mean, all the studies show that people are more creative, they're more open to learning when they don't have their guard up like that. When
Right.
you mentioned the old school thing, I just had this funny memory. Back in I think it was 2019, I did this music festival in Estonia, and there was this really old school piano teacher there who was doing a master class, and it was literally like the kind of thing like the student would play a note, and he'd be like, "No, that's terrible!" And, like just shouting. It was kind of his style, I guess. It was like kind of why people, gravitated to him as a great teacher. But watching the student like play like wrong, horrible, I do. He actually said to his student, like, "Do you call yourself a musician?" Like it
Oh my
was really, I had never witnessed that like kind of um teaching in quotes before, and I just thought it was horrible. I mean, this, one student like, went away crying. It was people don't learn that way. Like they might become mechanically able to do the thing that way, but it's not organic, and so I totally agree with you. I think that students have to feel like they want to be there, and and if they don't want to be there, giving space for that too. And we don't always want to do the things that we have to do, and kids especially have to do so many things they don't want to do, having to go to school
Right.
7:15 in the morning every day, and I mean it's brutal. um
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that like kids have that kind of learned obedience where it's just like they just have to kind of put up with whatever,
yeah, they,
they
they
get.
don't have any say. Yeah, I mean they have to do
Exactly.
both. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
um
I have my adult students where I can be a little bit more firm and more honest with them, about stuff. Like I've had teachers where they weren't, jerks about it, but they were definitely like very firm, like, oh, Fiona, like this really needs work. Like you really need to work on this. And at the time I was like, oh, really? Like I thought I was beyond that, but
mhm.
sometimes it kind of hits you a little bit like, oh man, they're giving you that talk where it's like, oh, we got to talk about this.
Yeah,
um how you're playing this passage or this part of your technique or whatever it was also like a frank conversation, and I would always be like, oh, okay. But that was always like really powerful for me. Like I had a teacher that said, this is your pattern that you're doing again and again, your compositions, and it's very episodic and you're not really developing it. You're just going from one idea to another idea to another idea. And even though I was very like, oh man, kind of like I thought I was doing well, but then, but it's like your ego kind of like gets calmed down. You're like, oh, I'm still like what do you call it? Like you have to approach it as if you're always a beginner. That's the way you want to approach things, is you're always like, everything is just like, whoa, oh, I could do that. Oh, I could do that.
mhm. Yeah,
Um, with kid students, though, it's more about the exploration. It's way like focusing on the positive things that they're doing and less about like, oh, don't do it this way. I always try to like focus on the positives and like really
yeah, yeah.
reinforce that.
Yeah, and even just like structuring what you say in a way where like it's not a don't do this, or like if you can describe the opposite of what they did, I think it can, then they can start to visualize it. They're not, because your brain can't differentiate between, what it's always, your brain is always creating pictures. So if you're saying like um don't don't hit the front of those notes so much, it should have more, it shouldn't be so much front end on those notes. The kid is already like internalizing, like embodying that feeling of like, it being really forward. And I mean there is a sense of like needing to recognize what you're doing
Mhm.
that's negative, but if you could describe it, says like, can you even out your notes so that it's that there's no emphasis on any part of it, it's all just like one big block of sound.
Right, right,
And
exactly.
then they can picture that, and they no longer have that physicalization of like the heavy hitting version that they were doing before. Oh, sorry. So, uh, I'm by a piano, in case you're wondering. But yeah, it's just sort of like being able to. I feel like as a teacher, your job is to be able to structure what they're doing, direct it in a way that then they can start to picture it in a more positive light. And like
Oh.
that, super hardcore pianist back in Estonia, he wasn't doing that. He was only pointing out the negatives, and not showing them ways to reframe it to be positive, or to um, picture it in a new way. So I think that's something that um, can be very, very helpful.
Yeah. I wonder how that style of teaching, that very strict style of teaching, kind of came about. Because I know like, with like Beethoven, it was just like if he played a wrong note, his dad would beat him up and he'd get locked in the cellar. And
Yeah.
so it's just like, how did we come from that, and I think maybe people thought that that was how you're supposed to get someone to really, and I guess we didn't understand psychology, human psychology
Yeah,
back
I
then
was
as
just gonna say, yeah, it wasn't a field yet, and we know so much more about how people learn now.
much.
Um, and and also I like maybe just out of frustration, of wanting someone to reach a certain point at a certain
Mhm.
time, and everyone is on their own path. What
Right.
takes one person 5 minutes to learn on the trumpet can take someone else weeks and months and years, so it's just everyone's on their own path, and I have to kind of remind myself of that sometimes, that it's you know when I'm trying to learn something, it's like, one day it clicks, but it takes, it's not, you can't just like will it, into happening. You can't just like hit your brain, and like
Right.
make it click. So yeah, you have to kind of allow that time and space to, have something absorb. Um, but yeah,
Right. Yeah. And I'm thinking just about like brass instruments in general, the teaching that is so different from piano, because piano, you could have like a cold, you could have a broken foot, you could still play piano.
yeah.
When you're playing like a brass instrument, it's like your body, I feel like it's more like singing. So like your whole body affects your sound, your mood, how tired you are.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder about that with piano too. Like, how, I mean, I would imagine that there's some overlap there with, you know, but yeah, it's true with breathing. It's so, uh, it's such a vulnerable thing in a way, breathing in and out, and
Mhm.
um, just from, the like dabbling into mindfulness that I've done. It's like the way that you breathe is, it can say so much about what you're experiencing in that moment, even when you're not fully cognizant of what you're experiencing. And um, it's so yeah, I mean, it's so connected to your nervous system. Your heart rate goes up, you start breathing more when you're nervous. So being able to um, manage that in a way where you can still perform consistently is uh yeah, it's totally connected to emotion, and to the body, what you're feeling, what's going through your mind. uh yeah, some of the best advice I've received as a trumpet student has been stuff about that, about just how mental, not mental, like mental games, how they affect your playing. Just if you think of the note being a little bit further away, it's like what? Um, then suddenly, you're changing your breathing automatically. Your mind is making those physical adjustments for you. Yeah.
Right. No, that's interesting because I was just listening to the Tony Robbins thing, and he's like, your mind is so um it influences you. So like they did a study where they gave people a drug that was supposed to make them have more energy, and they told the people that the drug would make them sleepy. And so
Mhm.
the people actually they felt more sleepy after taking the drug that was supposed to make them more energized. And then they did the vice versa, with the people that they said, oh, this will make you um very sleepy, but it was, or the opposite. And so it was like whatever the mind was believing, that kind of their body would react to what they thought it was supposed to happen.
It's crazy when, I mean, whoever is working on like quantum physics and quantum mechanics and all of these things that are kind of
Mhm.
connected with how we affect our reality. Um, I want an update because,
Yeah.
someone who knows nothing about these things, I know that there's something, it'd be really cool to know the science behind that.
Yeah. Oh,
Where is
definitely.
that?
There's a really good book, The Inner Game of Music, that I read many years ago.
You know what? That's one I've been meaning to read, and I have not read it yet.
Yeah, I would really recommend that book. That book, I should probably read it again. But it talks about like, I mean, a lot of things, but like visualizing yourself playing is another big thing. So I know like for some of my piano students, when we're learning chords, I try to get them to learn the chords without looking at their hands. So it just becomes, it's like a person that's reading Braille. They just kind of know what this position feels like, and they kind of know where they're at on the keyboard. And they go through the different inversions. But that way they're not, trying to look and trying to like, it just becomes more of like a, hey, we're playing, we're improvising, we're dancing. It's trying to, not, so it just it gets internalized so much.
Yeah, yeah, that's sort of just kind of letting the muscle memory kick in, because
Right,
you
right.
start evaluating and thinking really. Oh, here we go. Here we go. If the second you start kind of thinking about things, you're already kind of getting away from the music and the actual musicality of what you're doing, and yeah, like that's another thing that gets passed around a lot in brass circles is like this idea that, the more you think, the dumber you'll play, like which is kind of harsh, but I think there's some truth to that,
Sure.
like the person who can just kind of
Hmm.
flow and not let their body and their mind get in the way and they just get really good sound and no restrictions, no tension.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my God. It reminds me of another book I read. It's by Kenny something. He was a jazz pianist, and he was talking about the same thing. The more you're worried about like playing the notes correctly, the more likely you are to play them wrong. So it's like you almost have to go out there and just not caring at all. Just like, oh, I don't care if I mess up, you
Yeah,
know.
right. But like that's the thing. It's, how do you get to that point where you're not there? Like where you can really just be like, I know this so well that
Mhm.
nothing could go wrong, and like when is that point? Because I've personally
Mhm.
never gotten there. I've always been like a little bit nervous or a lot nervous, and yeah, I don't
Yeah, I
know.
think I think that like there's a certain point where you're just like you practice as much as you can, and then you just have to surrender. You just have to be like, okay, whatever happens, happens. I've practiced, I've prepared as much as I can.
This is the
Um,
best I could do at this point.
yeah, like I had a piano teacher that said like you're not supposed to practice the piece that you're performing the day of. I don't know if I totally agree with that. I would play through it really slow, maybe not exert all my energy, not play it at like 110%, but I would just play it at like 50%. So I'm not really using everything, but I'm just trying to maintain, just for my own certainty, like, oh, I could still play this piece. Because sometimes this has happened a few times where right before I'm about to perform, like, how does this piece go?
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah.
I
Yeah,
psych myself
you
out.
don't want that. Right. Yeah, yeah. And I thought it was kind of cool. Like I went in the Bay Area here, there used to be a brass, you know, festival. And I remember that the principal of San Francisco Opera was talking about how like what he does right before he does an orchestral audition. And I think it's really applicable because he was talking about he just like puts on his favorite recordings of the excerpt that he's going to do,
Mhm.
just has it on a loop. When other people are like practicing in the back, he's like, they're not going to get it because they haven't, like, they're not embodying the music yet. And they're still, we're focusing on the physicality of it, like trying to hit the right notes, trying to, hit that, double piano perfectly. And like, at that point, it's like, that's what needed to happen in the practice room before. Once you're there ready to perform, you're just soaking in the musicality, um, trying to get into that headspace of, being in the middle of, an orchestral movement, and then, your part is just fitting into that. And I think about that like sometimes with just regular performing too, not even just orchestral audition stuff, but um, just, trying to prepare to the point where you can be at that point where you're just focusing on the music. And
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that like there's a certain point where you're going beyond the technical proficiency part, and then it just
yeah,
becomes about the full expression of the music just coming through you. It's almost like it kind of gets channeled through you in a way where you don't have to try. You're not thinking. It's just kind of like you're dancing. It's just this very automatic. Your mind is not even, because I feel like at a certain point, like if you're still thinking about the notes and like, oh, is this the right note? You're not going to fully be present with the music.
Yeah,
It's still,
right.
it's
Which is
not quite learned.
I think that's totally why this negative approach to teaching is not working because, or it works, but it's just not music. Like, if you're thinking so much about, oh, I hope I don't, don't miss that. Hope I don't do this. Um, my teacher's going to kill me if I do that wrong. Uh, then you're not thinking about the music anymore. It becomes about the ego. It becomes about yourself. And I think the more we can kind of attempt to separate ourselves, from what we're doing, probably the better. I
Yeah. Yeah,
um
I think that like thinking, because I would always have student piano recitals at retirement homes back in the day. And I would always tell my students, like, this is like a gift to these people. They're going to love it. Even if you play all wrong notes, they're going to be so happy that you just attempted to play for them. Just the fact that you're giving your energy and, giving
yeah,
your time and energy to them. They're going to be so pleased. So seeing it as a gift, like, hey, this is what I'm offering, as a musician.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, a chance to express yourself and make someone else feel what you're feeling. And yeah, I mean, that's beautiful. That's beautiful that your students like had experiences like that, like so young, um that's cool.
yeah, yeah. Well, I know you gave some recitals too, right? Back in the day before.
Yeah, back in the day. Yeah, I mean, as far as like my own playing has gone, I've been doing a lot more sort of collaborative stuff. But yeah, I think my favorite way to perform is in like a chamber group or, an orchestra or, a big band or um, I don't know, right before COVID, I was really lucky to get to work with Dr. Russell Rodriguez at Santa Cruz, who was doing a lot of music, Mexican folklorico and Cuban son. And, just as a trumpet player, that was a dream. It was so fun to get to
Wow.
explore, explore Cuban music. And yeah, I mean, um, right. So.
That's so cool. Yeah, because you have like a diverse kind of background with your education and everything. And it's
Yeah, yeah. At times it feels a little bit like random or, like, it didn't follow a very clear line, but I am, in retrospect, I think I wasn't at a place where I was ready to just kind of hunker down and just do, orchestral trumpet playing and lock myself in a studio for 8 hours a day and it's just not really, like I said, I'm bad at practicing, so I just was never really something that I was ready to do. I think now that I kind of know how to practice better, I think I could do it now, but you know,
Mhm.
but I want to. So
Right. Well, I think we're social creatures. So it's like those days of like practicing in the practice room for hours and hours and hours. I don't really think that's really humane in a way. I think that we need, like, I agree with you. I love playing with, other people and, my jazz partner or my piano partner. Like, I love to do a lot of two piano forehand stuff. I love that like social interaction. Otherwise, it's just kind of like you're in a room playing music by yourself, which is really lovely too. But also, I feel like there's this community kind of thing that I'm kind of craving with.
yeah, well, and when you're playing a monophonic instrument like the trumpet or singing, I mean,
Mm,
you really do need that. I feel like with piano and guitar and, instruments where you can accompany yourself,
mhm.
maybe it's a little less, vacuum feeling, but when I'm just, practicing trumpet, I'm just like, oh God, where's the rest of the orchestra? Like, this is so boring. I want to hear everything else. And, yeah, I mean, that's been like, I think being able to learn how to kind of be alone with myself with my instrument
Mhm.
has been, a really big takeaway. Like I don't mind practicing for hours and hours anymore because I know how to do it in a way that isn't self-deprecating, negative, toxic. Um,
Right.
but I had to learn how to do that, and I think I had to, and I have to it's a practice. I keep having to remind myself how to practice my instrument in a way where I'm not just, defeating myself before I even start. And, um, you know, I try to also, I guess with my students, try to remember that they've probably got their own inner dialogues going on that, I have to help them circumnavigate so that they can actually, stay creative, stay open, keep learning and not let, what they want it to sound like and they're not there yet, get them down.
Mm. I think that's really cool though that you're as a teacher you're also performing, because I feel like there are a lot of teachers that have kind of given up on performing. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on, being teaching but also performing.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question because I think so many music teachers want to still keep that part of their identity alive. And I know that when, especially like teaching online and then, moving into in-person classes with elementary school music these last couple of months, I was really struggling with balancing my own, creative ambitions, right, with the responsibilities of being a full-time music teacher. And I think that, like you said, a lot of music teachers make that choice that, they are just going to focus fully on building the program and, um, kind of get their creative outlet through creating the lesson plans. And um, I got a lot out of that myself, even. I really enjoyed lesson planning, and I'd be glad to share a couple of the lesson plans later if that would be.
Okay.
Just some examples in case anyone's wondering how to get started. Uh, because I just had to go through that process myself. I'm not a music ed credentialed teacher. I'm a performance degree teacher that became a general teacher. So, I think, uh, there might be some things that are helpful for someone who fits a similar profile. But uh, I think that for me, it was I was putting so much of my energy into just managing I had in this last group, I had about 400 students across 6 different schools,
Oh
40
wow.
different teachers to report to, 6 different principals that I was accountable to.
Wow.
It's it was completely consuming. It would just, and I know that a lot of the elementary school music teacher jobs in California are like that.
Mhm.
So I just know that the people I know who are doing that type of job literally don't have time to do anything else.
Wow.
The way that I managed it, because I had a few performing opportunities, during that time, was one of the, I just had to take like one day off, like the day of the dress rehearsal. I called in my sick day for that. And it was not easy. Like they didn't have a substitute teacher. Actually, the day I was going to take off, I ended up going to work anyway because they couldn't find anyone.
Oh
So I
my
was like, well, I'm already up. Like, I guess I'll just go to work today. It was just sort of this
God.
ridiculous situation where, I had done all this stuff on my side, but they didn't have anyone to do this very specific skill, which is, teaching music. And they didn't have any subs to even do like a study hall. So there's things like that that just make it, trying to be, prepared, ready to go for a performance where there's no excuses for, being tired or being late or these things. Um, it made it very hard to do that. But at the same time, I think it's so important for the students too to see that that their teachers are out making music and that they're you know, having a career with it. There's so much negative press about becoming a musician out there. You know, I mean, there's just so much negativity and saying, well, you know, make sure you have a second, you know, second degree. Make sure to get a business degree with that music degree you're getting. You know, the double and triple majors, you know, but I just, it was really important to me that my students see that, you know, that I'm also still performing and that there's music that I really am passionate about and want to be, you know, that I want to continue working on my craft and I'm never like done learning the trumpet. Like it's something,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like
Right,
it's
right.
something you're always working on it. And for some people that's very not what they want. They want something that they, you know, they see the project through, they finish it, they move on to the next thing. Music isn't like that. You're never done.
Exactly, exactly. That's so cool. So how did you your upbringing, how did that shape you into going into music? I'm curious. Um
Yeah,
you know, like because people could have you could have gone into nursing or business
yeah.
school. And how did you
Funnily enough, yeah, I I thought about I was a pre-med degree for like the first like whatever that is. It was psychobiology. That's what it was. I
uh
was for like 3 out of the 4 years that I was in school. So I took all the psychology and you know chemistry. I took OChem, like all this stuff. I was horrible at it, but I tried. I really tried. And I don't know, like I think that so upbringing is that I was very fortunate that you know I have a very musical family. Both my parents are professional musicians themselves, so I kind of grew up seeing, you know, going to like concerts and
mhm.
you know sitting backstage in the green room and you know
Wow.
watching them lead choirs and you know and just seeing that they were able to have careers. You know, they were not like working for the New York Philharmonic, you know, they were doing freelance work in the area. And just by, I mean, granted, working multiple jobs and really having to balance a lot with, you know, 2 kids and like 4 choirs at one point in my dad's case, uh, it was possible. You know, you can have a career in music. It's just not going to necessarily look the way that, you know, your friend's parents' job looks, you know.
Right, right,
And yeah, I just think that for me was a extremely valuable takeaway to actually see people doing it because there's so again so much naysayer uh, feedback saying that you know you can't really do that as your main thing. And I think that the flip side of that is that I didn't always get the feeling that you could still be a successful musician and not have it be your full-time thing. So
mhm,
that's sort of the downside of that is that, especially nowadays, a lot of really, really good musicians are working in, you know, HR, working in finance, and, you know, and like that's what they do to make money to live in this area, which is very expensive. And
right,
then, and then they make music, you know, they do private lessons. And so, I think that's been important to see too, that, you know, you don't have to be, uh, you know, following sort of a traditional like orchestral player
right.
path or, you know, only have like one six-figure, uh, you know, orchestral job to be considered, you know, to have a life as a musician. Um, so, and I think it's important for students to see that too, that, you know, when I was working with Meredith Monk in November, she was describing how musicians kind of, you know, cobble together different, you know, things. And I love that word. And especially coming from her, who's
Oh,
just
I love her. Yeah.
amazing, such an amazing artist and human. But, you know, just to have her sort of validating what, you know, what so many of us are doing to do what we love to do, that meant everything to me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, also there was Charles Ives, who was an insurance salesperson, and
Yeah, that's true.
right,
Yeah,
he loaned money to all his composition friends, you know, like Eric
yeah, yeah.
Steve Reich, I think, and maybe Philip Glass and a few others. And then Philip Glass, I knew he was a taxi cab driver at one point. Like it's almost like he didn't want to, or maybe it was Steve Reich who didn't want to be teaching music because he thought it would take away the magic from actually doing the music, writing the music. So he kind of kept his job separate from his passion, which was kind of interesting, I thought.
Yeah, yeah, that is. It's also like Harmonious or somebody like that was also not, he was like a lawyer. I remember,
Oh,
can't
wow.
remember, but yeah, and I mean, also this whole thing of, the with composers, like this, the mad genius, and all of this sort of the elevated, the way we elevate conductors in
Right.
classical music culture and all of this, it kind of, it can be, I think, toxic because, you know, I'm not a mad genius. Like, I'm not an highly, like, I'm not a genius conductor. Where do I fit in, to um, the music world, if I'm not either of those things? So,
It was funny. One of my friends was like, a conductor does nothing. Like they just wave their hands and they're just like, no, this is coming from a piano teacher friend that was like, he actually went to Santa Cruz too, but
shots fired.
for us.
Shots fired.
But it was just so funny. He's like, the conductor's pointless. You don't need the conductor.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't
Okay.
know. I think it can be definitely like it's kind of like equivalent to like the lead singer in a rock and roll band. It's like the ego can get a little bit carried away with being the conductor because it's like, oh, I'm in charge of this
Yeah. Well, and
people.
it's like it's marketable, like as um as musical groups continue to kind of try to find their identity in the 21st century, and especially like orchestras, and there's like always this this doomsday sort of mentality around, classical music is dying because young people don't listen to it anymore, and as long as that's sort of out there, I think there's going to be uh kind of equally unfortunate ways of trying to put classical music back on the map. Like, oh, this amazing person, is going to
Mm,
be, the savior of classical music because he's just so brilliant. It's always a guy, it's always like, so, I mean, I just think that it's somewhat, it's advantageous to the institution to uh, show kind of, highlight certain people as like Wunderkinder, and like, uh,
mhm.
it's what sells tickets, people want to see this person, they want to buy that album where this person is on it. So not
Yeah.
just classical music, but with anything, um, I want to buy the Kardashian makeup,
Right.
because good, it's just like, it
Yeah.
sells. So that could be part of it too. But
Yeah. Well, in the piano world, so Yuja Wang is a pianist and she got noticed. I mean, she has an impeccable technique, but she
mhm.
was, in a lot of the media for wearing these really kind of risque dresses. And she's like,
Really,
oh, I'll wear long dresses when I'm in my 40s, but I want to like, she'll wear like a dress like she's going to a club, And I had
yeah,
this
yeah.
conversation with my friend. I was like, because he thought it was like, oh, it detracts from the music, because you're,
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
I think, sometimes it's like if you're focused too much on if there's too much skin and stuff like that, it can be a little bit like, oh, wow, she's like almost naked and she's playing the,
Mm.
the Ravel piano concerto, like you
Yeah, and
can
it's so opposite of like what people
the
think about
culture.
classical music. Yeah, that it's in
Yeah,
this
so it's a bit of a
quiet
shock,
concert.
but like her playing is pretty phenomenal. If she was wearing regular clothes, would she get the same fanaticism and the same attention and energy? I'm not totally sure because it's like you got to stand out some way. And so she uses the way she dresses. I think she always has these really, they're like if you're going to a club, like, but I met her once
I
and
don't remember clubs anymore. They're a
oh,
thing of the past.
I know it's been too long.
It's
But
way too long.
But yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing because she would always have like at the San Francisco Symphony, it'd always be sold out no matter what she was performing.
Yeah, and she's
And
like an icon, someone recognizable and brings something to the music just by being who she is. And
right, right. And then I went to see Elaine Grimal. She did a solo piano recital, and that was so beautiful. She dresses very conservatively and, doesn't try to stand out or anything like that. I think
mm,
she just like her sensitivity is just amazing. And I sat in the front row with my friend Colin.
mm.
Um, but she doesn't have that same level of fanatic, fans that are just over the top, So I
Oh,
think that they have
oh,
to do.
sorry. Yeah.
Oh, I just think that like with classical music, especially because it's like, how many people do you know that are actually listening to classical music? I feel like everyone draws from it for inspiration. It's kind of like the source, as far as like influencing a lot of other styles of music. But as far as like people actually listening to it and going to concerts, it's very different energy from going to like, a concert just like of a typical, pop star or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. I remember like a couple years ago, there was an article that came out saying like, we don't need to change the music of classical music. We have to change or performances. We don't have to change like what's being performed. We have to change the culture around it. And I think that's so true because, um, like, I think I can't remember now. I think it might have been Oakland Symphony. I don't want to speak incorrectly, but I think it was Oakland Symphony allowed for food during the concerts. And, everyone was like, what? What about like the awkward potato chip moment, like in between movements? But they were just basically encouraging people, wear what you want,
Right.
bring food. And I think in a way that's kind of getting back more to, the OG classical symphony, where it was background music for parties and, it was in a big salon or a big ballroom where people were dancing and probably intoxicated and
Oh yeah.
it's become this so sterile vacuum packed experience and I think people just life is short. They don't want to the music is good enough to stand on its own, but um a lot of people who don't necessarily uh have the indoctrination of this is you know which is also I mean that's a whole nother thing that should we be really holding up like classical music on this pedestal that it's been historically on, or should we try to kind of hold up everything equally. uh I just think that if we could as a society, if the institutions and orchestral institutions could or classical institutions could, just kind of acknowledge that the music is amazing. We don't need to change. It's not that people don't care about the music. It's just making it more accessible and maybe kind of getting into more history. For people like understanding. Okay, here's why. The Eroica Symphony was so profoundly uh, important, for, European history and like, what was happening at the time. And so I think the more with anything, the more you know about it, the more you end up caring about it.
Yeah, well, like San Francisco Symphony, they would do like a pre-concert talk, and I thought that was a really good idea because that started getting people more interested in like what's really going on here. How do I listen to this music? It's because it's really complex. And then
Yeah.
afterwards, sometimes they do like a question and answer with some of the performers, which I thought was really cool. And then people from the audience could ask their questions. So yeah, it made it more accessible rather than, you're in the audience, you're kind of clapping and you don't really see the whole process of like, how does this all kind of come together? So it just kind of brings in the humanity part of it. But yeah, when I went there last time, I hadn't been to the symphony in 2 years, but the last time I went was a few weeks ago, and it was mostly like ages 50 and up. Like my friend Colin and I were the only like youngsters kind of there. So it's just like, where are all, our age
Yeah.
people?
Yeah, I mean, we're out here, but I mean, I haven't been to up, you know, so at an hour away. I haven't been up to
Oh, that's
the
right.
Symphony,
Yeah.
but I haven't been in, you know, a really long time. And that's kind of, you know, considering that this is like probably the most, you know, important part of my life, like, you know, like getting to hear live music and getting to hear, uh, you know, really good brass players doing the thing
Mhm.
that I want to do. Like, you know, why am I not doing that? So, yeah, I think there's also, you know, yeah, there maybe there's more to it too. Also, you know, there just aren't as many, like you said, there just aren't as many like young people necessarily that are interested in it. So, you know, if like a group was going, then maybe it'd be more, you'd be more likely to go. And uh,
Mhm.
but yeah, it's an interesting question of kind of how to, uh, you know, how to address that, how to kind of reverse the, um, you know, the elitist sort of bad rep that
Mm.
uh, that classical music gets sometimes, or a lot of the time.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, like the opera is even more, you know, for a very specific audience because the
Yeah,
ticket prices of going to the opera, there's that, plus the opera is usually a larger event, you know,
mhm,
sometimes 3 4 hours.
right.
Um, and the whole culture around that is even more, I feel like, for a small group of people.
Yeah.
But yeah, how do you make
Yeah.
it more accessible? That's a good point, you know.
I mean, I do think if tickets could be, you know, almost free, like that would do a huge, huge thing. I know, like for me, I had never really, I mean, you know, like I said, you know, both my parents are classical singers and everything, but I hadn't really been to, like on my own, been to any sort of opera production until I was in Europe. And that's when, you know, I was paying €4, €6 to go and do standing room tickets. But, you know, like that's an option there that um you know is partly because like I'm thinking about Austria specifically, but like their economy is so heavily based on the tourism from like interest in Mozart, Beethoven, Haydn, um,
Right.
all these musicians that kind of gravitated to Vienna. So Austria just subsidizes the you know, the heck out of it. So, you know, that's part of the reason why they can make the tickets so affordable, whereas everything in the US is very privatized, um,
Right.
and, you know, relies very heavily on donors. And then, of course, the
Mhm.
donors kind of get a say on what is to be performed. And often it's, you know, kind of the same sort of things that are in the sort of like canon of, you know, Beethoven, Haydn,
Yeah.
or uh, you know, nothing wrong with that, but uh, you know, there's so many other musicians and so many other composers
Mhm.
featured in, and I think sometimes it's just when everything is so privatized, you can't you have to go with like what will sell the tickets versus like what would be kind of breaking, you know, breaking
Right. Yeah, I know, like,
boundaries. But
yeah, in Finland, it was like that's the country that has the most works. I believe it's opera works, or maybe
yeah,
just
yeah,
works in
yeah.
general, performed by living composers. And it's because the government has, I mean, they have the Sibelius Academy there, um, where Sibelius studied, and then also Sarajevo studied, and Cleveajo. And so you have these government sponsored, I guess, grants that they give a lot of musicians. And they have, I mean, performances like every single night, even just locally. You could go, you know, to some, it was like a church or, you know, and these places would be packed. It was just,
Mhm.
you know, I remember hearing a piece by Arvo Pärt, and I mean, this whole church was absolutely packed. It was just like we were squeezed in, and it was a giant church too. And it was really cool. It was really cool to see how big music has a big influence in that country.
Yeah, new music. That's
New
really
music by living composers, exactly.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. I mean, just like the little bit of new music that I've gotten to do has been so rewarding, getting to play um, new music from Plansky at Santa Cruz and stuff. It's
Right.
just such a privilege to get to work with these people and really get to kind of get that immediate feedback and not wonder how, what exactly they want and even just the ambiguity with working with composers and like, yeah, just do what you want. It's nice to actually hear that from the composer versus, when you're working on, something by Haydn, it's like, well, it probably would like most definitely needs to be this way.
Right.
Otherwise, you're like destroying the entire style.
I
So no.
know, I know.
So, when maybe he would have just been like, oh, whatever, just
Right.
do what's fun. So
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, I like that with composers, especially a lot of new modern composers, contemporary composers. They're kind of
Mm,
bringing in the performer as being part of the co-writing process. So it's like, I like that. I like that, the performer has a say in how the piece goes. And, it might be you know, a, um, a graphic score or something like that, where the person gets to interpret it and it's different each time. I think it just kind of gives it more life. It kind of renews things. I mean, that's a whole other topic with, linear and non-linear music that's kind of improvised differently each time. So, but
yeah.
yeah, did you have some slides you want to share?
Yeah, sure.
Introduce
So
the ladies.
yeah, if I can just pull these up really quickly here. Yeah, I just have to make sure I've got the right thing. Sorry about that. Doo-doo-doo. Right. So this is just for anybody in your audience who is looking just for some really quick kind of uh, bullet point options for resources, just things that I used and that maybe will be useful for someone else. A lot of these are just things that are free. Can you see that okay?
Yeah.
The
Mhm.
Okay, great. And then I'll just do a quick.
I like this. This is really cool.
Yeah, I was sort of, it kind of helped me organize my own thoughts actually. So it's kind of, it was helpful for me to do this. But yeah, so the things to ask your school admin before taking a music teaching job. I called it, is there a holiday concert? Because that's like one of the one of the definitely things you should ask if you're going to be working at a school, because that is the difference between a full-time job and a two full-time jobs. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I will say,
yeah,
like, the recital, I know, like, the students are putting in a lot of hard work, but the teacher has to organize everything, make sure all the students are ready, do the recital programs, rent out the space, and it's probably unpaid and
yeah,
whatever else the teacher has to do logistic wise.
exactly. And I think just getting that out on the table is, even if the school's not going to make a change, they have to acknowledge that they are expecting you to do something that is not within your paid hours. And I think that's important because Um, I think a lot of the time when you're a music teacher or teaching something that is very specific,
Mhm.
uh, the people that are hiring you don't really know what you do. They
Mhm.
kind of know that there's something with singing, maybe, and you're kind of dancing around or something. Like, they don't know what you do. Like, they don't know what your skills are. They don't know how many hours you've spent perfecting the skill. So
Right.
you kind of, I think it's important to kind of let them know that, what you're actually doing in this job. Uh, just, yeah, because otherwise, I think the tendency is to think that you're not working as hard as like the math teachers or the science teachers. And I mean, it's just different, it's apples and oranges, um, but it's definitely not like less work. So, things to ask before starting teaching music at a public school. And again, this is just my opinion. This is just kind of from my own experiences, but asking things like, who is my supervisor? Like I was working at multiple schools within a district, so kind of knowing who to report to with things is extremely important. I think in any job, but especially when you have so many moving pieces like you do if you're working with multiple school cultures and school
Mhm.
hierarchies and
Right.
yeah, like it's a lot. Also, will I have a classroom? You think I'm joking, but I literally did not have a classroom at one of my schools. I ended up having to teach in the gym,
Oh
and
my gosh.
oh
Wow.
yeah. Yeah, and I mean it just creates all kinds of problems when you're in a gym. Like, the kids are running around when they're supposed to be seated because it's a gym. There's like people setting up the cafeteria for lunch while you're teaching. So I
Oh,
mean these are things that again, I don't think admin always knows what's happening when you're in like a space like that. So it's your job to kind of make them think about those things.
right.
Will I have a classroom? Also, will I be provided equipment? Where can I store it? Uh, these are some of the things that I needed for my job, but a piano, or a keyboard, a portable speaker to play tracks or to play music, a computer to run PowerPoints like this one, HDMI cable to connect to the TV, paper and pencils, whiteboards, markers, instrument repair equipment if you're doing an instrument program, and funding for instrument repair because that's expensive. Also a projector and a microphone because if you're doing something with instrumentalists, and especially if they're younger, having a microphone can be really helpful. I don't have like a super big voice, so a microphone for me was really important so that I wasn't like shouting at the kids and
That's a
sound.
really good point, actually.
Yeah, yeah, because I think I noticed like the first couple weeks I was teaching, I was having to shout, and I wasn't trying to be aggressive at all. I was just, they literally couldn't hear me. And then as soon as I got a microphone, their behavior was so much better because I think they thought I was being aggressive, at least subconsciously. And I wasn't, but you know, I am a small person. Like my voice is not going to carry the same way as someone else. So that would be maybe a very important one to advocate for yourself. And all the other teachers have microphones these days. It was just they didn't think about the music teacher. You know, so you just kind of have to advocate for yourself, I think, when you're one of these subjects that is considered extra or extracurricular. Anyway, budget. We don't have to go through all of these in big detail, but just knowing what kind of money you have to, build your program. If you want to have like music tech, that's really big right now, but that would require subscriptions to things like Soundtrap or BandLab, and you need to know kind of what you're able to work with, and make sure that your admin understands that you can't build an ORF program without ORF instruments. You can't build a composition program or songwriting program without the access to computers for the students. So I think informing your employer of what you need to do your job is especially important with music teachers because again, they don't have the expertise that you do
Right.
a lot of the time. Um, I was also, I mentioned, how are students going to participate in music if they're not taking up an instrument? And this one's a little bit just for my own soapbox, but I feel like every student should have access to music, even if they're not able to do an instrument for some reason. Some students' parents just can't afford the rental costs, or um, just for various reasons, they're not able to participate in the instrumental program if your school has that. So I think having another way for students to still be getting a music education is, I think, part of the work culture that I would ask about. Because if they don't have something like that, if they're only prioritizing students who have the money to be a part of their music program, I see that as a red flag. They need to have multiple ways for students to get some sort of music and arts out of their program.
Yeah, I totally agree. I know that like when people didn't participate in a certain piece, they might double up on percussion or something, or
Hmm.
voice, something that
Right.
uh, could be easily transferable. But what about, did you list anything about like score costs?
I didn't, because with the stuff I was doing, I was mostly just using free resources, which I'll get to in a
Oh,
second.
okay. Okay, cool.
But the scores, like if you were trying to get like buy a score for, a full ensemble, symphonic band or orchestra, it could be anywhere from like 30 to 150 or more, depending on, how famous it is. If it's like, a score from a musical or, those can get pretty pricey.
Right.
Um, I ended up subscribing during my online year. Actually, the district was really great about sort of spending money on subscriptions to like open source, or not open source, sorry, to online um, like online music stuff. So like
Mm,
smart music, we use that. I use that a lot in my classes, and it kind of helped fill that void of not being able to play together.
mhm.
But yeah, besides that, just also understanding how the school is supporting students. Like, will the students have if they have someone who's sort of helping them with their learning or their behavior, if they have a paraprofessional present during the class. I had some circumstances where I had students who would normally have someone helping them who were not required to be there during my class. And that was, of course, a change for the student. They're used to having someone there that isn't there, and now they're in, a room that they're not usually in with a teacher they don't normally have. That's just a lot of change for a young person to adapt to when they're already, needing adjustments with their learning systems. So I think just making that super clear from the get-go that you're going to have people supporting those students is critical. What
No, that's a really good point because I've had students where the parents didn't tell me the student had a learning disability. And so I was like, kind of wondering why I was having to adjust my teaching so much. And had they told me and like been, because working with anyone with a learning disability or anything like that is going to change your teaching and
yeah.
maybe takes on a lot more time and energy to work with them.
Yeah, and I mean, I totally understand how exhausting it is to have to, constantly like, advocate for yourself and like kind of have to re-explain something over and over again to a system that doesn't do a good job of like, tracking what you need.
Right.
But at the same time, yeah, like I went into a classroom once where there was a student who didn't speak any English, and I hadn't prepared anything for that student to, be able to do what we were doing, and I just felt like I had failed them. Even, but really, I should have been informed. Wait, I should have at least
Yeah.
been told. And the thing is, like the other students were then, it was their responsibility to advocate for her, which is on the one hand, that shows a lot of great, social emotional learning, and the students kind of like supporting each other. But on the other hand, it's like, shouldn't the school be doing that? Like, that should not be on the student. That
Right.
should be on me. That should be on me as the teacher to make this accessible for that student. And so that I think addressing those sorts of issues early on is really important because otherwise, you're having to kind of figure it out on the fly. And, there's so much of that anyway when you're teaching a giant group of students where you kind of adapt things quickly. Um, but yeah, I mean, the rest of these things we can kind of just jump through. But, in case anyone would be interested in looking at these in more detail, maybe I could just share the link on your
Oh
YouTube.
yeah, definitely. No, this is very well written. This is
Oh,
actually
thanks.
really, these are really good
Well, it
questions.
comes from trial and error. But yeah, just basically getting a clear picture of what, the discipline policy is at this school, and how how to like how to advocate for your students the best you can given the constraints that are put on you. You know, that's pretty much what it is. And I mentioned my situation where I had to go to work even when I had called it in. But a couple online resources that could be useful. A lot of these are ones that I used while I was having to teach online, but I think that they're adaptable for in-person learning as well. A couple websites like Teach Rock has a lot of great lessons incorporating American music history with other subjects like history. I saw there was a science one. I ended up using a Teach Rock lesson that incorporated like environmental justice issues with song sampling. I can show that lesson a little later if you want. Uh, with the elementary school kids, I ended up using the Carnegie Hall Musical Explorer series a lot. This is all open source, free for teachers to use. And you know, what I like about it is that it features a lot of musicians who have performed at Carnegie Hall. Uh, they are combining, kind of composing their own music, combining like American music traditions with the music traditions from where they're originally from. So that was really cool to kind of bring in, you know, the world music in a way where it's, you know, being led by people who actually are, um, you know, creating the music and are from that particular part of the world.
Mhm.
Slidesgo.com, this particular uh, thing that I'm using right now is from there. So it just, you know, if you want to have PowerPoint templates that look nice, slidesgo.com is a great resource. I got that from my colleague who I was working with at the middle school.
Oh,
Virtual Piano if you want to visualize things. BandLab for recording things. There's just a few of those.
right. We also, in our Renaissance class, we used Acapella, that app
Oh
for,
yeah, that's
it was
right.
really cool because you could layer different things and you just record it on your phone,
Yeah,
and
that's right.
send
Yeah, with
it
the toy piano.
with other.
It's amazing. Yeah. God, that class was so fun. Yeah, I mean, I loved it. It was just
It was
so,
great. Yeah.
yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it was really challenging too, trying to get all of our tracks to line up well because we were all kind of building on top of one another. Man,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a great experience.
Oh, definitely.
And then just a few other resources that could be useful. These ones you have to pay for, but if you're working for a school, they might be able to back you up with these for Nearpod. That's, you know, very useful for kind of gamifying certain, you know, music things that you're trying to teach. Soundtrap is great, like for that sampling and mixing thing I mentioned. Sight Reading Factory would be great if you have an instrumental program because you can just kind of throw up a factory generated sight reading activity up on the board, you know, up on the screen, and everyone has their part in their key. You know, they kind of get used to reading a full score. It's probably, you know, maybe for a little more advanced group that would work. But then, you know, Flipgrid is how students recorded themselves when we were online. But I think also for private lessons, this could be very useful if you're trying to get, you know, midweek feedback from somebody. You know, they just kind of record how something is going. I always treated the Flipgrid assignments like a work in progress, just to kind of hear where the students were at and just kind of hold them accountable for doing the practice and, you know, not just practicing when we were online in front of the computer. So I think that's kind of a good way to, you know, just kind of keep people, you know, giving you feedback in a way.
Yeah, that's helpful. Like having them kind of, if they have a question about anything, they can kind of send it. I always tell my students, just text me if you have a question. I don't want you to like be practicing something wrong the whole week. Always feel free to ask
Yeah.
questions and stuff like that, or send me a recording of what you're doing. Another link I would add is Teoria, Tioria, which is really good for music theory. So that would be another one I'd recommend. And that's like chord, it's a lot of ear training stuff too. And
All right, that
um,
that
yeah,
sounds good.
no, I recommend that one. That one actually helped me prepare for my UCLA, the exam.
Awesome.
It was very
That's actually
helpful.
one of my 2022 resolutions is to learn music theory, you know, and
Ah,
get much better
nice.
at it. So get better at recognizing chords and all of that. So
And there's
I
also
will.
some apps too. So like I use it's the UCLA music theory app, which actually you can it plays different types of chords. And I didn't realize how like I was not really good at this, but like listening to the chords over and over again, I got really, just like being able to recognize them.
Yeah,
It's just
you
the
said that's an app.
UCLA.
That's
Um, I have so many apps on my phone. It's a UCLA music theory test. It's
oh
called.
cool. Okay, yeah, I'll check that out
Yeah.
too. I
This
could definitely stand to do that. Did a lot of like ear training stuff with the elementary school kids, but that's not the same as doing ear training at the collegiate level. So I could definitely
right,
use some work.
right.
How cool! Yeah, yeah, yeah. Then I don't know if we have time for this, but I
Yeah,
did have,
yeah.
yeah, like do you have, I don't know, 5 minutes or something?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah,
I have no idea what time it is, so I've
it's all good.
okay. Oh my goodness, yeah, okay. So yeah, basically a couple things, just keep a class or student log. You can kind of keep track of what you've done with each class. Because I was working in a way where I would have back to back to back classes, and then I would sort of, it was all kind of a hazy blur. So I think kind of being able to keep track of what happened in each class, how far you got in a certain lesson can be really helpful. And then for private students, you can customize that even more, where you make it open to them so that they can like you were saying, leave comments and have, if they have any questions, they can send those your way, and you can maybe answer them midweek or not. Just make it a thing that you address in the following lesson that you have together. Also, like I know this was really big during COVID, but I feel like we're forgetting this now. Is just that your students is kind of like what we talked about right from the beginning. Fiona, is like your students need to feel comfortable, in their environment. And with private students, just remembering to ask how they are and letting them answer. I know that sounds like super like automatic, like of course you would do that, but I've had to remind myself sometimes because I'm just like, okay, we have 30 minutes. I want to cover arpeggios, long tones, and I want to teach double tonguing today. Like we're gonna go. And that's not everything we do as music teachers.
Right.
We're helping them learn how to express themselves in a way that is new for them. And I think that we have to kind of keep that social emotional learning buzzword in there sometimes, to kind of remind ourselves that that's part of it too, where they're not just learning a skill, they're learning an art. And
Yeah, definitely. And also just, some of the best teachers I've had have also been like teachers that have kind of taught me about life as well. Like I feel like I didn't get it's so funny, I get my money talk, like how I should manage my money from my piano teacher.
yeah, yeah, because totally, I would totally take financial advice from your piano teacher. Yeah, because they've had to walk the walk. They've had to have to figure out all these like weird freelance tax
Yeah,
things and like, yeah,
exactly.
yeah. I will be asking for their number later because I have so many questions.
Totally.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, the other side of this is when you're in a big class, the second you let the students talk, there is that potential for the lesson to completely derail, and you get nothing done, and the students who are really focused and want to learn music are frustrated because you just talked the whole time, and
Right.
so it's like it's a very you know fine line when you're working with a large group of people. So
Right.
that's sort of my disclaimer here, is that you can build time into your lesson plan for that sort of derailment, but you also need to have some strategies to reset the class. So like even just something kind of like a chant that you do all together, or a clapping thing. You with the elementary school kids, they're already kind of ingrained with doing, ba 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 da ba, and it's never on key. It's always like ba 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 da ba. It's never dun da da dun dun, and that would really bother me because I would always want to do with the correct pitches, and then the other teachers were just going like ba 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 da ba. I was like, there are notes. There are notes with this. Like you're teaching kids how to be tone deaf. But anyway, that's my rant about that.
Mm.
But anyway, um, yeah, I did teach the kids the solfege at one point of that because I was just getting so mad. But anyway, yeah, just things to help reset the class. And then I think this is just my last thing is just to mix it up, especially with the younger kids. Probably like 5 to 7 minutes tops is what you can expect in terms of an activity. I don't know if you've experienced that with your younger piano students, but
Yeah, we have to like for rhythms, it's all like exercise driven stuff because they have so much energy and they have a hard time sitting still. So it's like,
sure.
oh, we got to march our quarter notes. Okay, let's clap the half notes, let's march the quarter notes. And so it just becomes a very physical thing for my students that
Yeah.
have trouble sitting still.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, for that reason, I try to do as much stuff kind of out of their seats as possible.
Mhm.
So like for an example lesson plan that I kind of threw on the board here, like for the body percussion thing, I might have them like stand up for that if they, and I mean, some students don't want to stand it. I don't like force it, but I'm just like, if you want to stand, you can. For rhythm identification, I would have them move from one side of the room or the other. Like there would be two rhythms, and it's like, okay, if you think the answer is this one, go to that side of the room. And it's kind of fun. They're like running and like crashing into each other, and probably not safe, but but it's they get moving and they get into it. I mean, then they do learn, they recognize the rhythms, and that's
Right.
great. And then after that, I'll usually try to like repeat something that they learned from the previous week because in my schools that I was in, I usually had anywhere between like 30 to 45 minutes of teaching time, which is not a lot. So, I maybe review the solfege hand signs, or maybe teach, just kind of going from do to sol a bunch of times, just to kind of get them remembering what we did the week before. And then the main activities. So learning to sing a new song. Oftentimes I was just teaching the chorus of a new song because there wasn't enough time to teach more than that. Maybe teaching them a new song that has a new uh, time signature, so like having them kind of move in that time signature, things like that. And that would sort of take up the majority of the time. And then at the very end, asking them, okay, what did we learn today? Okay, we reviewed our solfege. We did, a body percussion video where we reviewed quarter notes and eighth notes. We talked about music from Colombia. We learned part of this song for using like that was when I was doing the Carnegie Hall stuff, and then just kind of trying just connecting the activities back to actual learning goals because so often it's the classic like, okay, what did you learn at school today? Nothing. Like, I don't know. you know and I just think that's largely because as teachers we forget to tell the students why they're doing this thing that seems kind of pointless. So
Right, right. They got to know the why behind it.
yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I did have a student, like a fifth grader, who's, kind of knew what was up. She was sort of saying, when are we ever going to need to know solfege? And kind of put me on my toes. And I was like, well, honestly, like, you probably don't, unless you're going to be, I mean, I'm just honest with her. It's like, if you're not going to be a musician, you probably don't need to know your solfege, but it does kind of train your ear to, recognize certain pitches. And I don't know, I had like a whole thing, and one kid, bless his heart, said like spoke up like some of the best scientists in the world are also really good musicians. And I was like, you get an A,
Ah,
So it was just like, the kids sometimes don't always, they're forced to do so many things that they don't really want to do or don't know why they're doing it. And
right.
any sort of connection we can make back to something that will actually continue on for them, I think is valuable, no matter how old they are. I mean, this was a fourth or fifth grade class student that asked me that. So, it's not very old.
Right.
And they want to know that they're using their time in a way that's going to benefit them, even at that age.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So I'm trying to remember if that's the end. Yeah, that's the end of my
Oh,
little thing there. But
Well, thank you for sharing this all with us. This was very informative. I feel like I learned a lot,
Oh,
actually.
well, thanks.
So that was very helpful. And it's funny because I did get an email from someone that was like, oh, well, you work at this music school. So it's
Mhm.
kind of interesting. I don't have time to take that on right now, but these are really great questions and like resources. So yeah, if people want to find you, how can they reach out to you or follow your work?
Um, yeah, I was thinking about that before we started our talk today. At this point, I might have to follow up with you just because I don't have a website at the moment. Hopefully, by the time this gets posted or whatever, I'll have something in that regard. But uh, yeah, or I could maybe leave like an email or something like this.
Yeah, or social media link or something like that so they can find you
Yeah,
or
sure. Yeah, yeah, I can do that.
okay,
Yeah.
awesome.
Thanks for letting me, kind
Oh,
of go on my soapbox about,
yeah, no, it was great. I learned so much and I'm sure this information will help a lot of people. So really appreciate it. And like we should definitely try to do a part two. I feel like there's a
yeah,
lot of
yeah, like,
information here.
yeah, yeah, to be continued. Yeah, it's so easy to talk with you and, yeah, so much to talk about when it comes to this stuff. So thank you.
Definitely. It was good talking to you and it's good to catch up with you too because it's been like a
Yeah,
few years
I
since we
know. Yeah,
together.
yeah, yeah. I'm stoked about all the playing you're doing in the area. I'd love to come hear you play sometime and sing. Just
Yeah,
even
yeah.
the little bits I've seen. So
Yeah,
yeah, I got to head up to the North Bay. South Bay's always feeling further away than it actually is.
I know. Well, it's close to Santa Cruz. So,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, awesome. All right, Jenny, take care. We'll see you
All
later.
right. Cool. I'll see you
Okay.
later.
lives